Hello and welcome to the special CNBC Africa broadcast. My name is Nozi Pombanjwa and we're coming to you from Addis Ababa in Ethiopia, and we're here attending Africa Development Week 2016. This is a meeting of African Union ministers and the United Nations Economic Commission for Africa. And on the agenda are the big issues in Africa, from migration to climate change to the green economy as well as the blue economy, amongst many others. To help us understand how this platform captures these issues, we caught up with the Executive Secretary of UNECA, Dr. Carlos Lopes, for more.
This is like a federation of many events that we used to have, in a non-structured way. Like, for instance, there is a regional coordination mechanism, which is when the UN agencies dialogue with the African Union. There is the former heads of state of Africa forum. There is a meeting of statisticians, and you name it. Number of meetings that now come together to do this very exciting program of a development week. For me, what is new and exciting in particular is the fact that we have really positioned the debate around knowledge and research pieces that were not available before. At least they were not available made by Africans.
Yes.
So we have now a huge number of publications that are launched during this week that are like the cement for a more robust discussion.
The delegates at the conference did not shy away from the big issues. Corruption and good governance were some of the thorny issues that were discussed in today's conversations.
Well, people have become familiar with the Mo Ibrahim Index that ranks countries in terms of their governance performance in Africa. And it's a very interesting experiment that we are very proud also to be part of. What this report does is slightly different. This is more the qualitative discussion, not the index discussion. And this qualitative discussion moves from one theme to another, trying to look into aspects of governance that really make a difference in Africa. Last time it was managing diversity and elections. Very important topic.
Yes.
This year is about corruption. And immediately people think, they are going to do something along the lines of what Transparency International does and others are very busy doing. And not at all. What we are trying is actually to see what is the benefit of all these indexes. Where are they focused? Are they really related to facts? And we found out that most of them are perception-based.
Right.
And therefore, they are not very accurate in the way they judge Africa. And because Africa is already minimized in so many fronts, this is just one more. Is this to say that we don't have corruption? No, we do.
Yeah.
But we want, through this report, to put the finger where it does make a difference. We say mostly it's external induced corruption is responsible for illicit financial flows.
Yes.
And the rest is the making of very bad fiscal and tax systems. So let's tackle those. And this is what I think the report really tries to achieve, to shift the discussion where it belongs. So we definitely see progress in the fight against corruption.
DG, I understand that you were one of the few people that was in the briefing by the former heads of state today, speaking about the importance and the relevance of the APRM today. Give us a sense of the key messages that they left with you.
The primary message that they gave us was that, in their view, the APRM is even more relevant today than it was 13 years ago when they founded the instrument. We've had in the discussions people such as the former President Thabo Mbeki, who was one of the founding fathers of the APRM, and they're able to share their experiences. And in fact, even when we left now, they said they will have a follow-up discussions amongst themselves and give us even more feedback after these discussions.
And as the conversations throughout the conference sought to look to solutions to find new ways of improving the movement of goods and people on the continent, those markets that continue to have rigid visa regimes were certainly put in the spotlight.
Unfortunately, we have a very stringent and rigid visa regime on the continent. But I would like to allude that to the fact that countries that are supposed to take leadership on this are refusing. One is South Africa, 2 is Ethiopia, 3 is Nigeria, 4 is Egypt, 5 is Algeria, 6 is Angola. You know, when you look at the countries that are economically developed, socially more developed, politically more advanced, they are the countries that are refusing.
Is there a common reason that they all share behind why they've adopted such rigid visa regulations?
A common reason, that could be difficult, because when you look at the problems or the issues important to South Africa might not be the same issues that are important to Nigeria, might not be the same issues that are important to Ethiopia, you know. But most importantly, I think it also has to do with the historical realities. Because, for instance, South Africa was a closed society for a very long period. But 20 years down the line is an appreciable level of time wherein some of these issues will have been addressed. But as we speak now, yes, there is some semblance of free movement regime, or mobility regime within Southern Africa. But when you look at the Southern African Protocol,
yes,
the SADC Protocol on free movement, the countries that are supposed to ratify it, the migrant-sending countries like Zimbabwe has not ratified it. And interestingly, South Africa has ratified it. But you realize that South Africa is more open to member states within the region than outside the region, which is affecting, one, the perception about South Africa. It's also affecting the economic position of South Africa, as well as the social position of South Africa. Economically, for instance, I can give you an example. When you look at Ethiopian Airlines, not every African can come to Ethiopia with visa.
Right.
Sorry, without visa. But every African can transit here going to any other African country, which is not the situation in South Africa.
Yes.
You realize that that is impacting negatively even on the South African airlines, you know, because most often passengers are left. Somebody going to Namibia is not allowed to transit in South Africa. Even somebody with a diplomatic passport. I can give you an example. In 2014, we had a ministerial meeting in Windhoek. My minister was coming from Sierra Leone. He had an American passport. He was allowed to pass through Johannesburg. 5 members of his delegation with Sierra Leonean passports were not allowed to pass through. They had to spend 1 week in Accra just so that they could get a transit visa.
Industrializing Africa's economies were one of the key issues that were brought up in this week's conversations. But greening industrialization, a new concept, also got its fair share of debate.
Well, people may think that we are just riding on COP21 excellent outcomes for some. But in fact, you know, we normally start working on these economic reports almost 1 year before, so we didn't know Paris was going in the direction it did. We have been saying Africa stands a chance of doing industrialization differently because Africa is a latecomer. The latecomer has a lot of problems, but it has some advantages. So we have to look into the advantages that are specific to Africa. And one of them is the fact that right now, producing electricity, producing energy from renewable energies is as cheap as doing it with fossil fuels. So we are the first region in the world that can industrialize green. And if you add to that, latecomers not need to retrofit anything because they don't have it. So they can leapfrog into the latest technologies that are the cleanest, the less carbon intensive. So we have an opportunity. So these are the 2 entry points. And then we develop what it takes to really do it in a systemic way. So it's not just about taking these 2 advantage points, but rather, you know, multiplying these excellent opportunities into a range of policies that will allow Africa to have the label of a green industrialization.
You can more or less say that there are almost like 3 categories, and that's how I tend to see it. You can say that there is a category of African leaders and countries that are front runners in this. They already realize that, you know, they can decouple, you know, economic prosperity with fossil fuel use. And the methods of decoupling is basically looking at the energy systems, looking at forestry, agriculture, some of those key sectors, and basically to say, how do we achieve industrialization using these sectors as drivers, as conduits? So you can see that some countries already in Africa are much ahead, far ahead in terms of going down that pathway. Ethiopia is one example of those. Mozambique, Rwanda, and others are doing quite well. And then you have a second category that are aspiring towards a green industrialization, but they're not quite there yet. And of course, you'll always have a category that are more or less laggards, that want to get there, but that may need the technologies, the knowledge, because with greening, we can't necessarily assume that we have the answers. There are new sets of skills and capabilities that would have to be developed. There are new sets of institutions that would have to be configured. There are governance arrangements that would have to be made so that local governments can be fully cognizant and participative in this sort of green trajectory. So I think it's fair to say that yes, there is a greater awareness that Africa's structural transformation lies at the heart. Industrialization lies at the heart of Africa's transformation, but that we do not have to continue to do dirty development. We can green our development, we can green our economies, and we can be one step ahead of the curve by having a smart, sustainable and also technologically driven foundation for that economy to grow.
And at the very core of the conversations had during this week was a focus on regional integration. More importantly, how do we unblock the bottlenecks that continue to impede acceleration towards integration?
Of course, having said this, there are a lot of challenges. The first one that comes to mind is the challenge of infrastructure. This continent still need to be connected, whether soft or hard infrastructure. It is up to very recent time to go from one part of the continent to another, you have to fly through Europe. So, and not to mention roads, rail and all this. So I think this is a key challenge. Of course, other challenges are linked to the issues of trade, barriers, whether it is tariff and non-tariff barriers and all that. So I think there are some policy issues and all that. But I would like to believe these are challenges still again, going back to the optimism, they are surmountable.
This episode has focused on Africa's big issues as the continent moves forward on its developmental agenda. What appears clear is that as we move into the future, these issues also become increasingly complex. From Addis Ababa in Ethiopia, for CNBC Africa, I'm Jusu.